So hi, everyone. Hello again. My name is Muna Assi, and I head product marketing here at Atera, and I'm very delighted to be moderating today's session, our Spotlight on Partners. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'd like to again extend a warm welcome. This is our partner collaboration series. It's really an opportunity for you to learn about the different solutions that we offer through the App Center, the different partner integrations, and give you insights on how you can optimize your operations, enhance your security posture, and more importantly, drive business growth. So today we're delighted to host our partners from Domotz and from our partners from Abussi. Let's get this moving. There we go. So are you ready to supercharge your revenue with network monitoring? This is going to be a very exciting webinar. Believe me, more exciting than watching the World Cup right now. So I will apologize if you hear in the background my colleagues shouting and screaming for the games that they didn't watch, or for those that they're going to watch live again soon. Just a reminder, we're going to do a few housekeeping slides. So before we get started, just reminding you that this session is being recorded, and we will share the recording after in the follow-up emails that we send out. If you've got any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box, not the chat box, the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. We have a team with us here. We've got Giancarlo from Domotz, and we've got Sarah from our customer success team. They're here to help address your questions as we go through the presentation. But obviously, we have a Q&A session at the end, which will also address any questions that remain. We do have a short survey that will pop up right at the end of the webinar. I invite you to please give us your feedback, respond to that survey. It doesn't take more than a minute. It helps us improve and helps us know what else you'd like to see and how we can help you further. So let's take a look at our agenda. I'm going to start by introducing our speakers. Gentlemen, welcome. We've got JB and we've got Craig with us. If you want to turn on your cameras for a minute, we'll say hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hello,
wonderful.
hello.
Thank you for joining, JB from the US, and we've got Craig there from the UK, who was just telling me right now that it's, what, 7 degrees Celsius?
7 degrees Celsius with a plan to be 2 degrees Celsius overnight. So yes, that's why I'm wearing a woolly sweater.
Awesome. Awesome.
Woolly.
I was
It's
just telling
woolly.
Woolly. There we go. So I won't boast that where I'm at, it's 27 degrees outside and people are still running on the beach. So, you know, there we go.
You know, it's funny because I could also tell you it's 27 degrees, but here it's Fahrenheit. So
there
it's
you go. See, you got that one. Awesome. No, we're on the Celsius side, so we still have the sun. So we're going to cover today profitability and network monitoring. How can it help you boost your revenues? We'll talk a little bit about the customer journey. We'll hear from Craig about how he's leveraging these solutions to both grow new business revenue streams and also be a trusted advisor to customers. We're going to talk about identifying some of those missing opportunities and how network monitoring can be used in each step of your customer journey to add more value. And like I said, we will end it with Q&A, but I do invite you to post any questions that you have through the Q&A box, and we will try to address those as we go through the webinar. So, about myself, as I said, I head product marketing here at Atera, but I'm very, very excited again to be hosting JB with us, Chief Product Officer at Domotz. JB has been with Domotz since 2017. You've probably spotted him on some of the training videos or the webinars. Definitely, if you joined our last webinar, I think last month, we also hosted JB. He has decades of experience in the AV and MSP space and is passionate about translating those exact needs of Domotz users into product features and integrations. When he's not at Domotz, yes, there is a time when he's not at Domotz, he loves mountain biking, he loves using his laser engraver and tinkering with the latest AV gadgets.
It's true. It's true. I love my laser engraver and I love AV gadgets. They both go hand in hand at some points. So
there you go. And do they help you with network monitoring?
Actually, we have engraved a few things that we've put onto our racks, which indeed help us with network monitoring. Yes. So
there we go. See, we need to utilize technology to its fullest. And I'm most delighted to invite our partner and customer, Craig. Craig Sharp is the founder of Abussi, an MSP that's based out of the UK. Abussi was founded back in 1995 and has transitioned over the last 26 years from software into break-fix hardware and then into a full-blown MSP services, which they've been focused on the last 15 years. Craig is also a former teacher and educator, and he has a passion to educate and inform. That goes great in this business. He's been managing and transitioning the business over so many years, and he's required focus in key skills such as sales, marketing, account management, supplier relationship, and finance. And all of this together has given Craig a unique perspective on a wide range of businesses and how they can be run better, especially where they embrace IT and cloud. So with that introduction, again, thank you, Craig. Without further ado, I do want to hand over the mic to you, JB, who will be telling us more about Domotz solutions. So over to you, JB.
Awesome. Thank you very much. In fact, I think, Muna, I'm going to take over some sharing capabilities as well.
There we go. Let me stop that and give you that as well.
All right, now I have to see, now you guys get to be surprised on what it is I'm going to share here. So let's see how this goes. We want to share this screen and we want to start off with Domotz, I think. So we'll do this. Okay, Domotz. So while I'm putting up this slide, I know if the Atera team wants to go ahead and launch that poll, we can. This is going to help both Craig and I as we have this discussion around, what it is we talk about with respect to Domotz. How familiar are you with network monitoring in general? We want to get your perspective on how you see this. I know Craig is going to add a lot of information here about network monitoring and what Abussi does in general with respect to network monitoring, but I think it's going to be well received. So I'm going to close that down on my side. Craig, while we're pulling up the results or getting those results, let's go to your slide here, if I can transition through. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Abussi and how you guys got started and kind of where you see yourselves going in today's environment before we get started.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, that slide can be read by everybody as required, but effectively it's a chronological list showing that in 1995 we were a software and training provider. Once people out in there listening to this will know that if you're putting software solutions onto people's networks, you very quickly realize that unless you've got some management of their network, the solution you're deploying doesn't run very well. So that's how we became more of a sort of value-added reseller. And then we did some break fix. And then we were very early adopters of an MSP model in the early 2000s. And that really kicked off our growth. And now we provide a whole range of services to our clients. And the way I describe what we do is as a outsourced IT department. So if you work for a large corporate, they have an IT department, they're there all the time, it works, it's great. But for most smaller businesses, they don't have that resource available to them. So we are an outsourced provider of those services, but we literally do anything. We joke about the fact that we provide help on anything that's got a plug or a network cable attached to it. So we give advice, we give proactive support, we give reactive assistance. Anything that a company needs to get over that problem of something not working, that's what we do.
Yeah, yeah. You know, nowadays, right, people are finding more and more widgets that have to get connected to the internet, and
Yeah,
I'm sure you guys are there, right?
well,
And
we are, but without sounding too cheesy, Domotz is also there as well, because all of those Internet of Things devices all appear within the Domotz network monitoring product. So yeah, we're across all of the things that people randomly plug in and don't realize the consequences
yeah.
of.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, that's actually a wonderful transition into this slide, right? And from our poll, the results that I saw is actually there's a lot of people that are not familiar with Domotz. In fact, the majority, it was probably about 75% of the people that responded to the poll were not familiar with Domotz. So that being said, let me talk about what Domotz is as a solution. And then Craig, we'll work that into how you as an MSP utilize that with some of our agenda here that Muna brought forth. So first and foremost, Domotz is a network monitoring solution. It is meant to help you as a service provider or as an integrator understand what's on the network, as well as understanding what the network infrastructure is doing and how it's working. The very first thing that Domotz does when it's put or activated on a network is it will scan the network. It will discover all of the devices that are associated to that network. And more importantly, it's going to classify those devices. So it's going to tell you, this device is a certain make, it's a certain model, it's a certain type, but it does it for everything that it sees on the network. And we get a lot of questions around this too, but it also can go across VLANs and subnets, depending on how you configure the system. So that's an important part for a lot of service providers as well. Once you understand what's on the network, and once Domotz has looked at the network infrastructure, including the routers, the firewalls, the access points, the managed switches, all of those things that make up that network infrastructure, it's when you're going to be able to start now setting alerts on these devices, right? Look at the important devices that are out there. Look at the network infrastructure. Look at the configuration files of those. And if anything changes within that's unexpected, you can generate alerts on those. When it comes to traditional service provider tools, you often think of a remote monitoring and management solution for your PCs, your laptops, and servers. But what do you do when there are more either the infrastructure devices like the network devices, or when there are systems like video security or unified communications or other devices that are connecting to the network that you need to also be aware of and monitor and even have opportunities to manage? Well, Domotz provides that secure connectivity into those devices that are out there so that you can then do things like firmware upgrades as appropriate or reconfigure things or even power cycle systems. So in my mind, Domotz is really meant to be a tool for you to run your business more efficiently. And I often say, look like a hero, because what we want to do is make sure you're aware of any problems or system issues before you get that phone call from that customer. And as Craig's going to talk about too, it wouldn't be great if it wasn't easy to deploy and easy to use as well. So
yeah, and it is very easy. Do you want me to have a quick talk about that now or not?
Yeah, if you want to, let's do it before we dive into this one.
I mean, I think the deployment of Domotz is really straightforward, and for the tech people out there, there are two key ways of doing it. You can run some software on a server or some sort of similar product. It's pretty straightforward. You download it, you associate it with your account, and it begins scanning the network and it runs live. Brilliant. I tend to prefer what we call the Domotz box, and I'll put a link in the chat in a moment to everybody. It's purchasable on Amazon or whatever. And I'm not a seller of these products, so that I just mention it because I find it really useful. The challenge that we found with adding the client to the server is hardware fails, hardware gets redeployed, hardware gets moved about. You gather so much valuable information on these Domotz instances on the network that if that then fails or you lose access to that and you have to start again, it's just lost data. So the Domotz box is really helpful because you deploy it. It's a tiny little, passive box that just sits there. And unless something happens terribly to the site, it's just going to be there forever. It's never going to move, and they never fail. So I'll just put a link in the description here to the box that we're talking about, and that's what we use. But the great thing about those boxes, which is the other helpful tool, is the fact that they're portable, which also means, we may come on to it in a moment, JB, you can use them pre-client deployment in a assessment capacity,
Sure.
and then take it off site if nothing happens. So we'll talk about that maybe in a minute. But yeah, deployment really, really simple.
You know, it's interesting you say that, Craig, because you're right. That box gets a lot of people get excited about it because of the ease of deployment, the ease of installation. You know, it's Domotz has several different ways you can deploy its software or that network agent. You can use Windows, you can use Linux, but that little box does make it kind of convenient for many.
It's true. And look, I know that to the audience listening here today, predominantly techs, they will say, well, I can deploy it to a computer or some sort of legacy device that I'm not using very much, and it's fine, it'll just sit there. I can't tell you strongly enough that we've done that in the past. And yeah, it works. It might work for a couple of months or a year, but at some point that device will fail. It will need to be reinstalled. There'll be an OS problem, and all of the valuable data that you've gathered and are gathering will go, and you will have to start again. And I just don't think it's worth it. So, you know, you're better to buy a box.
JB, if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of sidetrack you a bit with what you just said. We have a question about, you mentioned that Domotz has a network agent. Customers are asking, what is a per network? What does that mean?
Sure. It's a good question. You know, we often use the word per site also, right? But essentially, there needs to be what we call a Domotz agent that sits on the network that you are monitoring. Now, that network can be made up of multiple VLANs, okay, so layer 2 VLANs. It can also be made up of subnets. So a Domotz agent, which is sitting on a host, again, whether it's the black box or a Windows machine or a Linux server or a NAS drive, right? There needs to be one piece of software running per site that you are monitoring. So thank you for that question, Muna.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then there was another
Just
question about the data being stored locally. Apologies, Craig.
Right.
I interrupted you on that.
No, I was just going to add that I think the key point they want to get out of that is pricing. So yeah, each instance is the price, and then it's not based on number of devices it finds. It's not a per device price. It's a per, effectively I see it as a per site price, unless those sites are connected over VLAN. So I could imagine a scenario where you'd have a headquarters location and 2 remote offices which are tunnel linked together. You could put one Domotz instance there and cover all 3 sites. So
you can.
That would be one price.
Yep, you're correct, right? And it's just a flat rate of 21, right? 21 pounds, 21 US dollars, 21 euros, right? Depending on where you are. But it is meant to be simple and easy to deploy. And Craig, you're exactly right. Depending on the network configuration, a single Domotz agent can look across really multiple sites depending on how you configure it. So. Yeah. Muna asked about data storage. You know, one thing I'd point out is that Domotz is a cloud-based solution. And so when you have an agent deployed, that agent is essentially, and I hate to say it this way, but essentially a dumb piece of software that's receiving commands from the cloud to say when it should scan a network. But it is that agent that's also looking for changes in the network. When a new device shows up, or whenever a sensor is told to be monitored, right? If that data needs to be captured, it's captured by that agent and then passed up to the cloud and stored in the cloud. So it's a great question, but primarily all of the intelligence is really based in our cloud service. So, Craig, let's move on to how you are leveraging network monitoring in general, right? But I'm appreciative of the fact that it's through Domotz, but in order to increase profitability and boost your revenues. Yep. So, you know, we talked before about this, and I'm curious, you know, some of these sub bullets that are on here, you know, give us some of the use cases and how you utilize Domotz for this.
I mean, let's start at the beginning, and I can give an example that we did this last couple of months, which is you can use Domotz in an assessment capacity before you actually onboard a client. You could use it during a sales conversation. So we had a conversation with a client that was based in London. We visited them for that initial conversation about what are you looking for? How do you want us to work with you? But I took a Domotz box with me, asked permission, installed it on the network, which is literally just plug it into power, plug it into a network point, and then had a conversation and left. And that
I'm glad you asked permission, by the way. That was
I know,
great.
always ask permission. But that box was helpful because then this is the core of what I'm trying to get to, not the technology side, but the principle. When you're quoting for prospective clients, you are given information by the client, but the client is probably not as well versed in what IT they have as they maybe ought to be, or they might have a blind spot about things that they were unaware of and about how complicated they are compared to their perception of them. So with that particular client, we were able to know by the time I got home, frankly, from London, which is a 2-hour drive, how many devices on the network, what type of devices were they. You can even, from some of the laptops, you can get serial numbers. Within Domotz, you can do the serial number lookup to find out how old the equipment is, and so on and so forth. So just having that box on site prior to me providing a formal proposal allowed me to make sure what I'd been told was accurate and did it match with what we were seeing on the network. Was I being told the correct information about, well, the laptops are only a couple of years old, but suddenly when you put the quote forward, you find out they're 7 years old and everything's terrible. So use case number one is accurate information prior to providing a formal proposal. I think that is really, really helpful. The second use case is really about being able to provide very fast, very effective assessment, diagnostic, and response to certain issues. So as JB, you've already said, you can set alerts, you can be told of problems perhaps on the network, on the LAN or the WAN, prior to the customer even recognizing that themselves. And so you can be told if certain key devices are offline. You can decide which devices are classified as key devices. So if an IP phone goes offline, maybe no one cares. If the domain controller goes offline, everybody cares. So those are the things that you can set up. So there are two use cases before I sort of ramble on anymore, but I think they're really, really useful.
The pre-assessment side, right? To go back on that, right? I cannot tell you how many times that I've talked to service providers that started using Domotz for assessments, where they have told me that, the client, right, or the future client, told them they had X number of devices. But often, once Domotz is put on the network and monitoring the whole system, they realize that there's a lot more on their network than the client expected. I mean, it can be anything from security cameras to, like you said, voice over IP systems that are out there, unified communications, but also just general IoT. I mean, you find Amazon Alexas, right? You find Google devices, you find watches, you find iPhones that the client doesn't realize they're there, but they can also be affecting the network, right? And that's something for you as a service provider. You need to have kind of this truth in numbers that you can speak to them about to say, hey, here are the things that I'm, finding, and it gives you an upsell opportunity. So I think
absolutely. I mean, ultimately, you as the MSP are, I mean, again, it depends on the model that you use, but our model is based on a flat fee per month based on the volume of IT that we have responsibility for. So it's really important for us to know what's on the network, because ultimately that's part of a pricing model. And if at the prospecting stage we underestimate the amount of IT, it then gives a very difficult conversation in the future when we finally take over and we've costed based on X number of devices or users or whatever, and we suddenly find that actually now that we're in the organization, they've got 25% more things or more people that they hadn't accounted for, and that makes it difficult. So having that information, and that's really what Domotz is all about. You mentioned about volume and effect. Another thing that Domotz will monitor on an hourly basis is network activity, internet speed activity.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
A pretty basic thing, but there's a lot of times where the customer is maybe complaining or raising issues about problems on the network, and you find out that it's because of excessive bandwidth use, or maybe their ISP or service provider has a problem and you can pinpoint where that was and explain why things were particularly slow on that day. So, those are really helpful tools as well.
Yeah.
So Craig, to that, there is a question if you monitor specific services like DNS or DHCP as part of Domotz.
So within Domotz, you absolutely can get in there and monitor different aspects of the network or the routers and the firewalls that are there. We can do that one of two ways, right? We can leverage technologies like SNMP, but we also, a feature that we've released this year and we're seeing a lot more traction with this, is our custom integrations drivers that a service provider or integrator can develop themselves over simple JavaScript. And you can monitor things like certificates for systems. You can monitor, like I said, the routers and the firewalls as well. You can see things like DHCP servers if you want to write drivers for that. And by the way, part of what Domotz is doing is taking a lot of the basic, I guess I would say things like that, the monitoring needs, and we're creating drivers that we're putting in the open source community. So you can find that on our GitHub resources. So it's a great question. Great question. Craig, I want to move on to the next topic in the interest of time, and it has to do with the customer journey. You know, you talked about the assessment side of things, and when you first meet with a new prospective client, easy for me to say, meet a new prospective client, you're in that consultation phase, right? You're trying to understand what it is that they have, what are their needs, what are the problems that they have. You get into the assessment, which then allows you to do into this quoting. Making an assumption here that you as the service provider, you know, win the bid, win the job, right? You then go to this onboarding process. But then there's this notion of what we would consider to be upselling and business reviews or technology business reviews, right? These are the things of, hey, we're seeing problems on your network, and now we want to, you know, provide these extra services. And then there's this review stage about, you know, how well did we do, right, as a service provider? But then you're also looking at what are the new pain points that have come around, right? Is all of a sudden, you know, your team is working more remote, or are you bringing on new technologies that require our services in one way or another, right? Are there security issues, right? There's lots of things you can do. What's your thought on the customer journey? And I would say, how does Abussi in general deal with this?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people who are listening to this, they will be very anxious and concerned about anything that involves the word selling. And I totally get it, because every time I've done a webinar with people in the tech industry, that all of the questions that are about selling tend to be really highly focused and highly intense. It's not necessarily a default setting for most people who are in tech is a selling process. But I don't think of myself as a salesperson. I don't think that I sell things to people. I don't think that I upsell things. What I do is I use data and information to provide an accurate perspective of how a client's network or IT services are doing, and then find areas where they could be improved. Now, I think that's probably described as upselling, but if you look at it more as a technical analysis with some data attached to it, and not as a selling process, I think you can probably feel a bit more comfortable about that if your background is in tech. So for me, the Domotz product is one of a handful of items which we use during that customer journey. And we don't see the client being onboarded and being ticked off in Atera as an actual client as being the end of a process. We see that as the start of a process. And so for me, it's about making sure that the onboarding process itself can sometimes take, you know, weeks or even a month or so to make sure everything's right. But then you have maybe a quarterly or a half-yearly business review. And that's the point at which you take your data from Domotz, you have a look at what reports have been gathered, you work out what alerts have been happening, you see if you can find any continuity with those, you identify any failing hardware, issues, bandwidth problems, and you just present that information and say, well, we've identified this and we think we can solve these problems with the following solutions. And hopefully the customer will get on board with those ideas.
Yeah. You know, Craig, first of all, I totally appreciate your comment about upselling, because that word that word, the word sale in general, sell, it often has a negative connotation to it, or can, because somebody feels like they're getting taken advantage of in one way or another, or they're being bombarded with, somebody trying to push something that they really don't need. I like how you positioned it though, which is, and I'm going to also say, should that upselling block go where it is inside this? Probably not, right? Because in some sense, you should be continuously communicating with your customers. You should have a relationship such that you understand the pain points that they're dealing with, and then realizing what solutions that you, as a service provider, have in order to ease their pain. And, I work with several organizations, and one of the things that I think that you as a service provider really need to have with any of your clients is more of a strategic relationship, right? How can you help make sure that their business remains successful or continues to be successful and growing for whatever their strategic goals are? And to me, if you have solutions like network monitoring, and you're seeing things like security cameras that they need to have awareness of, or there's new devices getting deployed on the network that are mission critical that you should be monitoring, those are opportunities for you as a service provider to improve your strategic relationship and value to that client.
Well, the thing is that all of that turns towards the phrase that we've used before, which is trusted advisor. I mean, ultimately, you don't want to be seen as just a services provider, because by that definition, people could buy those services from someone else. But what they can't find very easily is a trusted advisor. And we take pride in working with our clients over many years. And therefore, if we get to a point where we say X and Y is happening and we recommend Z, the customer more often than not will say, well, if you're recommending Z, we should get that done then, shouldn't we? And there's no selling involved in that. I've not had to put special deals together or do the traditional, okay, if you sign here today, we can do you this sort of, it's not that kind of selling. It's just, it's trust about the fact that you're there to make their life easier. And I use a phrase, which is, if you can stop a client's IT metaphorically kicking them in the face every morning when they turn up, then they're going to love you. And these kind of tools that we're talking about, Atera being one, Domotz being another, they allow you to better service the client, better service the issues being raised by the client. They allow you to better report against those issues. And that is what will allow you to be seen as a trusted advisor, because you are across the issues that the client may have, or you may get ahead of the problems before the client even recognizes them.
So, Greg, let me ask you a question on that, right? Because you just referenced the Atera and Domotz really as tools for you. Does your company position, I guess, let me say it this way. Are you going to the customers with, hey, this is the price of these tools that I'm using, and therefore you have to pay X? Or is it more about the services and that you're offering, and it doesn't matter what tools are underneath or the price of those? How are you pricing?
Yeah,
right, is kind of what I'm getting at.
It's the latter. So for me, we are pricing our service based on, our core objective is that the less you call us, the better. Because we've actually priced, and that sounds like a weird thing to say or even admit, but I have said to customers, look, here's the deal. If we offer you a fixed price IT support service where we solve all your problems and make your IT very reliable, then every time you do phone us, we lose money. So it's our job to make sure that your IT doesn't go wrong in the first place. So it's heavily biased towards the proactive side. And that's why in my pricing model, the pricing that we have for the client allows us to build into that every type of tool we need to offer that level of service. So I don't go to the client and say, well, here's the kind of service that we offer, and in order to offer that, you'll need to buy these 5 different subset of services that we will need to support you. We just have a support price, and we then have built into that any costs relating to Atera, Domotz, anything else that we need. So, excuse me, we don't have it as a discrete line entry on an invoice for clients. We just offer support, and we've then bundled those services in the background to help us offer that service as best as we can.
And I think that that's a really important point that I see a lot of new service providers kind of faulting on, right? Which is, they think that if they have a specific tool in their tool suite, right, that they need to be able to charge for that. For instance, network monitoring is kind of a unique classification. And regardless of what tool they're using, they feel like they have to add that as a line item to their monthly bill or their annual bill. And I don't know that I agree with that, right? I really feel like, yes, this tool does cost you money, whether it's 21 euros or whatever else you're using for network monitoring, but it's really meant to help you be more efficient and give your clients more information about these systems so that you can continue to be a trusted advisor. I really like those terms.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is, whether this is known by the people listening or they've become aware of it, if you don't know this, I'm sorry for the shock, but the customer doesn't care why it's gone wrong. The more that you explain to them technically why that problem has occurred, the more you will annoy your customer.
Yes.
What the customer wants is to phone or email in, as long as the email server hasn't failed, phone or email in, provide the problem, and have a rapid solution to the problem. The customer will see the issues they're raising to you as black and white. There is no gray. It's working, it's not working. Those are the two states in which their service operates. And so the reason that we have these tools to support our work is we want to get them from not working to working as quickly as possible. We use the tools at our disposal. We pack them on their way and say, problem solved, it's worked, and the customer goes about their business. The longer they spend in a gray holding area between working and not working, the more annoyed they get. So the reality is that if you add lines onto invoices to show all of these technical services to try and make it look that you're doing lots and lots of things, they will be for nothing at the point that you can't solve the problem. So you might as well just focus on solving the problem.
Yeah. So much of business in general, right? Especially if you're dealing with, the upper management, right? They don't want to listen to your problems, right? Or they want to hear your solutions. Right. And that's why they hired you. So I agree, which that gets to the next slide, right? And we have this one bullet here, which is technology business reviews. But in the end, right, what this really is going towards is retention.
It is.
How can you be communicating with your customer in a way about and asking questions, right? So much. And Craig, you and I have talked about this on webinars in the past, right? I think it was a couple of years ago, where we were talking about listening, right? And being able to understand what the PIDAs are. Rather than me talk, right? You tell me what your thoughts are on retention and how to keep a customer coming back.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in its simplest distilled form, it's being good at providing the service that they've bought from you. And again, the best way to retain a client is to offer really good service very effectively in a very polite and a very customer focused way. It's not necessarily pertinent to this particular slide, but the one thing that we do is we try to make sure that we have a relatively tight tech team who build a relationship with the people that they're speaking to, so that when a client phones in, they go, oh, nice to speak to you again, Gav, Sasha, Brendan, whomever. And so they build that relationship. So constantly having different people dealing with issues unnerves the customer. So if you can build that relationship, then that works. Then you give the people who they've built that relationship up with, the tech team, really effective tools to make sure that when someone phones in, I don't know, I always use this phrase, Brenda from accounts. There's always a Brenda in accounts. I don't know what the equivalent of Brenda is in the US. It might be Karen. I don't know. I know Karen has
Karen's got
connotation.
They got a bad rap this year, Craig.
But Brenda in accounts has a printer problem. Now, look, printers are a thing which most people don't want to worry about. Printers always cause problems. But here's a tiny little use case for printers: is most people, if you want to access the web GUI of a printer, you've got to sort of bounce onto someone's laptop or desktop PC, open up a web page, then get the IP address of the printer. And then, so it needs the person to be in the office, the computer to be turned on, whatever. Yeah. Domotz, you just go to Domotz, you connect to the printer and the web GUI appears in front of you. You can do it at 2 in the morning. You can do it when everyone's gone home. You can do it without having to annoy anybody. But printer problems are the bane of an IT department's life. And so the quicker you solve a printer problem by using a tool like Domotz to access its web GUI and stop it going to sleep, or adding the duplex facility in, or whatever it is, you're going to help retain that client. So yeah, acquisition is a difficult one, but acquisition, I think, is all about building trust from the beginning. So going back to the first use case, put the box on site, learn what's on the network. You're showing that you know what you're doing. And when you go back to them and you have an absolutely comprehensive list of their IT, they're going to go, okay, these guys know what they're talking about. These guys know what they're doing. You're not just putting your finger in the air and going, yeah, I reckon it'll be about this much, or I reckon you've got about this much IT. It's all about quality, it's about data, and it's about professionalism. And these tools allow you to fill all of those 3 boxes.
You know, Craig, we haven't said anything about this, but one of the things that I have to imagine that you talk to customers about just during that assessment phase, right? And kind of showing you know what you're talking about is that network topology. I mean, if you can get a visual representation of what your future client's network looks like and get that immediately, I think that goes a long way into showing your expertise. So ensuring that you have the right credentials, right, to be able to visualize or give a visual representation of the network is really helpful.
Well, Domotz offers that ability to see how things are, you know, cascade network linked together. And look, back in the day, I've been in a situation where Domotz has helped solve a problem. And the problem was someone in an office within a factory that was saying, everything just seems really slow and I don't really understand why. Anyway, what Domotz was able to do was highlight that they'd got a really good network switch in the cabinet. But then you follow and trace this route and you realize that somewhere buried down the back of a filing cabinet, 3 hops away from the main switch, is this 25-year-old 10100 switch that no one had remembered to replace. And it was just causing a massive network bottleneck. And once that was replaced, everybody was happy. You know, that could take quite a lot of time to find, but the topography map allows you to see everything that's there. And it might even flag to you, oh, I didn't even know there was a network switch between Office A and Office B. I thought it was a direct connection. But, you know, these things seem so small and so silly, but they all lead towards that greater goal of giving better service to your clients and making the pain go away. You see yourself as a sort of doctor or medical professional. The idea is the patient, the client, is coming to you with an ailment. You provide some sort of medication or solution for the ailment. And if the ailment goes away, they're going to think you're great at what you do. It's not that difficult.
Yeah, you know, I've always said, right? I mean, our goal is to make you as a service provider look like a hero. And I think being a doctor is a great example, right? There's a lot of times where you're testing and you're trying to figure out what the issue is. You know, the client, right, doesn't necessarily care what the solution is as long as you're there to solve it and you show that you can solve it. And I think that having, you know, Domotz in there exactly in that example that you gave to show, okay, here's actually how this connectivity looks from this device all the way to your ISP. And if we can see that there's this unmanaged switch or an old switch that's on, you know, and we're going to tell you also, it's like, hey, this is on this firmware version that's like really legacy or really old, right? Those types of things are there to help you look like a hero. Right?
Yeah, it's all about, you know, doctors are about diagnostics, and so are we. And I've said to clients before, people think that as soon as they present a challenge, we will immediately, because we're technicians, go, oh, there's the problem, there's the solution. No, a lot of it's about diagnostics. You try a thing, oh, that didn't solve the problem. You try another thing. And what you're looking for is product or service or software that will allow you to rapidly find out which is the best solution. And that's what Domotz does.
Yes, agreed. Agreed, right? It's about improving your efficiency, right, as a tool and making you better. We talked a lot, really probably about the next slide, but I want to still go back on retention and based on your assessment here in the last like 5 minutes, I just want to understand, have you found more often than not by continuously communicating with your customers, by acting as that trusted advisor, that has helped you retain customers going forward? Or have there been situations where you've lost customers even though you felt like you did everything right?
There are, but it's really hard to sort of answer this question without sounding big-headed, and I genuinely don't mean to, but we don't lose clients very often, and the only time we tend to lose them is if they unfortunately are unable to continue business, and that happened during the pandemic. That was a bit of a problem. Sure. And again, going back to the 2008, 2010 financial problems, there were some clients we lost there. Or the other more common one is if we get to a point where the client is acquired by another business and they've got their own IT provider and they just get absorbed. So yeah, from an acquisition, from a retention point of view, the key thing is to just offer good levels of service, keep it professional, use the tools at your disposal. And by continuing to offer high levels of service, that's what people will retain. They will only look around for other providers if they're dissatisfied with what they're getting from you. And when we pick up new clients, predominantly the thing that's the opening line is, we're very unhappy with our current provider, we'd like to talk to you. Just don't be the person who is the person offering poor service, which makes someone go and look elsewhere.
Yeah, I can fully appreciate that. I can. This last slide, right? This last subject that I really wanted to hone in on, and this is almost a tagline for us, but I want to get your perspective on how Abussi has really capitalized on this with respect to using Domotz as well as Atera together. I would argue that Domotz first and foremost is meant to be a tool to help with your efficiency, right? Understanding what's on the network, being able to map it out, get those assessments like you've talked about. We haven't talked at all about security and cybersecurity, and as you know, we could probably have 3 other webinars, related to that. But the notion of understanding what's on your network is a critical part of the CIS control frameworks. Understanding every asset that's on there, but also understanding the network infrastructure and what that topology looks like and how things are connected. Being able to manage configuration files, right? Those are all pieces of tools that help with the productivity of you as a service provider. I'm curious, Craig, what's your thoughts on how both Domotz and Atera together have provided you guys with more efficiency and given you time back?
Yeah, I mean, we use both products. We use Atera and we use Domotz. And for me, it's about sort of tying up what we've spoken about so far. You save money because you spend less time solving problems. I mean, I know that sounds a really simple and short answer, but that's sort of where you get to if you boil it down to its essence. The more information you have available to you, the more diagnostic tools you have available to you, the more quickly you will be able to identify when a problem has gone wrong and what the solution might be. And by solving that problem quickly, it saves time, which is in effect earning you money, because every quarter of an hour you spend solving problems is time you can't spend helping other people with other problems. So rather than try and fix one problem an hour with one tech, you'd like to be able to try and fix 6 or 8 or 10 problems an hour with one tech. So yeah, you can save money and you can earn yourself time back. But to sum up on that, I think for me, the return on the investment of Domotz is where it really happens. You've mentioned the $21, 21 euros, 21 whatever. It's not a high price. We're not talking hundreds of pounds here for this level of data or this tool. We're talking about a relatively modest amount of money that will give you a huge amount of data and a huge amount of availability of knowledge and ability to get onto things on the network quickly. And I think you'll get that return on investment within a month. It's just really, really quick to solve. But I'm also aware that Julie is hounding us to wind up as well. So
she probably is. But I have a question for you. Hold on, Moon. I have a question. So, Craig, when you are leveraging these tools together, are you taking advantage, or do you most often respond to alerts that are being generated by Domotz and then a ticket being raised in a side of Atera, or are you leveraging Domotz more for the secure connectivity? Like you said, the printer is a great example.
Yeah, Domotz, we don't use Domotz as much for alerting. I mean, we have investigated the alerting option. And again, this sounds really terrible, and I don't mean it to sound big-headed. A lot of stuff doesn't go offline. We don't have that many problems. We don't need those level of alerts. We're pretty happy that our network infrastructure and the rest of that is pretty reliable. And so we're leveraging it more on the ability to gain information quickly to get to the root of a problem that may occur.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. All right, Muna, I see you've got questions. Let me
got a few questions if you'd like to take a look, but I can help with those as well. So first of all, thank you very much, Craig. That's been super insightful. And I think that, at least for myself, a lot of things that I've learned, and I'm sure that some of the attendees here today will take some of your tips on how to leverage that. JB, since you're working closely with our product management team, at the end of the day, this is a partner spotlight webinar. And at Atera, as part of our marketplace strategy, we believe in better together and having an ecosystem with a multitude of solutions for MSPs and IT departments to leverage what they need and at the time that they need it. Can you tell me a little bit about the integration level and where we stand today with the Atera and deploying Domotz through there?
Yeah, certainly. So, you know, our partnership with Atera has been going strong for actually a couple of years now, right? But just recently, you know, we've enabled Domotz to be available through the Atera marketplace, which is great. We're exciting. So any Atera customer can, you know, essentially activate Domotz through the Atera store there, which I really like. When it comes to integrations, right, the best thing that you're going to be able to do is raise tickets through the PSA side of Atera. So whenever a situation, and regardless of what Greg says about how he uses it, right, but whenever a situation on the network is raised, or an event that happens that you want to have knowledge about, right, you can automatically generate tickets with that, which I think is first and foremost, right, when it comes to proactive monitoring, one of the things that I think any service provider should be leveraging. And of course, when that event happens and a ticket is generated, right, we give you all of the information that you need and access to that device or that system that caused the alert, where you can get a history of it, see which tickets have been opened in the past. You can look back at how they were resolved, but then you also have the ability to log into that system now, and whether it's reconfigure it, reboot it, do a power cycle, whatever it is you need to do in order to get that system back online.
And the other thing to say is that the tickets raised out of Domotz, you just forward into, well, we would forward them into our tickets within Atera. So they then tie up together. So when we're producing reports for clients to say, oh, here's the work that we've done for you, it's a list of tickets where someone may have called in with an issue, and it's a list of things that we've monitored and noted, and they tie together. So you don't have to think of this as two separate ticketing platforms. You just forward one into the other.
Absolutely. That's exactly
awesome.
Right.
Craig, thank you. Thank you, JB. There is a question here really about Atera's network discovery solution, which is an add-on capability within Atera. And obviously for us, it's really a work in tandem with Domotz. So, you know, from my understanding and a lot of the use cases we see with clients where they're scanning the network with network discovery and have the ability to deploy the Atera agents through there. Can you highlight maybe, you know, one key differentiator, JB, and why you really need those two products in tandem?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a very good question. We get that a lot from you know, our various RMM partners and stuff, and other solutions that are out there. You know, Domotz does two things that really differentiates itself from others in the market. One is that IoT discovery and classification, right? How we discover devices, how we enrich the information from each device with make, model, and more importantly, type, really helps you as a service provider get to the brass tacks of what's on these networks, and helps you better document what these systems are. Again, when I think about CIS controls, control number one is about understanding all these devices on the network to a very detailed level. And we're making it so that you're no longer just finding out a MAC address or possibly a manufacturer, but we're telling you that make and model. Okay, so that's a big deal. So that's thing number one. Thing number two that Craig alluded to, and I think he's exactly right, when we discover devices on the network, we're also going to look at the ports on those devices, the TCP ports that are available for management. So these can be command line interfaces, they can be web portals, right? What we're doing is we're discovering those so that way you can get in and remotely connect to those devices through Domotz, right? The printer, great example. If you don't have to have TeamViewer or some other, third-party system out there, but you can just make that remote connection directly to a device so you can understand its ink levels or what its firmware is so that you can update it. That's real value that a network monitoring solution like Domotz is adding, and it's the reason that you would add that to your portfolio.
Awesome. I'd like to remind specifically Atera users that they can activate a trial through the Atera App Center. There is a 14-day trial that's available where they can test the capabilities. But there is a question here around, if we didn't plan for a demo, we wanted this to be more of a conversation and how you can leverage and sell the capabilities to end clients. If somebody wants to see a demo, what would you recommend, JB?
So easily enough, I mean, Domotz, go to domotz.com. Okay, you can do a 14-day trial, or you can go through Atera to do that trial. If you want to go a little bit deeper, there's two things that I would recommend. One is we have videos that are kind of like onboarding videos, show you some of the features, right? We call them our 101 and our 201 webinars. But the other thing I would tell you is reach out to sales@domotz.com. We'd be more than happy to get on a Zoom call with you, happy to show you our demo systems. We'd be more than happy to walk you through your systems, right? Things that you've discovered. Maybe there are configurations that you haven't set up properly that our team can help you with, so that way you can then see your networks, right? The network maps, or see how to make connections. We have onboarding specialists that can help with that. All you have to do is reach out to our team. And I mentioned one way, which is sales@domotz.com, but also our support team is absolutely amazing. So support@domotz.com.
Perfect. And I had a last question, which I think I take here. So yes, our intent for today was a partner webinar with a spotlight on Domotz and having Abussi here talk about their usage. Obviously, within our webinar section in Atera, we do have workshops and advanced training webinars specifically to the Atera network discovery solution, which we're not covering in today's session. But like I said, they do both work in tandem. We've seen customers leverage both, and specifically with the network discovery initially, to be able to deploy the Atera agents after doing that scan. So, we don't see a challenge, and on the contrary, we do encourage you to leverage the solutions that work best for your IT needs. We have come to the end. I want to ask Craig if you've got any final words of wisdom to our audience today.
Wow. I mean, I'm not a very wise man at the best of times, but I think I would say to people who are listening or watching this, focus on helping people with their problems and focus less on how the problem occurred, and just use the tools available to you within Domotz and Atera to make sure that you do that as efficiently as possible. Because my final point is, the customer does not care. You think they do, but they don't. So solve their problem quickly, use the tools available to you. That will give you long-term credibility with the customer and long-term customer retention.
Great, those are good words of wisdom. JB, any final words from your end?
I love what Craig said there, and I don't want to say anything that would derail that. So the one thing that I think Craig and I both need to come to terms with is how USA and Wales tied yesterday, and we've got to see how we fix that going forward in the World Cup. So.
There we go. There we go. Enjoy those. And I think at this point, I'd like to thank you very much, gentlemen. This has been a very interesting and engaging session. I want to thank our audience and remind you all that we do have a survey. It's less than 1 minute. We'd love to see your answers to that. So please take the time to answer a couple of questions, and looking forward to seeing you on our future partner webinar series. Thanks a lot, and go enjoy the World Cup. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.